This is a story about Colonel Mummar Gadafi.
No demonstration at all in the streets.
Even after 40 years in power, Libya's Colonel Gaddafi has some bold ambition.
Mr. President, I started fighting Gaddafi before you started. I started fighting Gaddafi before you started.
They love me, all my people with me. They love me all.
Today, the government of Libya announced the death of Muammar Gaddafi.
This is the place where Gaddafi was finally captured at this point, but he was still very much alive. From here, they took him to another location, and everybody we've spoken to says he remained alive at that point.
Right now, Libya, nobody even knows Libya. Frankly, there is no Iraq and there is no Libya. It's all broken up. They have no control. Nobody knows what's going on.
So the world would be better off with Saddam Hussein
100%.
and Gaddafi in power?
100%.
A story about love, money, and betrayal. Even in death, Gaddafi is perhaps still one of the most popular African leaders of the 21st century, who has fascinated very many people both within and outside the continent because of his generosity, charisma, rule, and vision for the continent. For reasons best known to him, the brother leader, King of Kings, loved and invested in Uganda so much, helping presidents like Idi Amin and Museveni. His heart of love spread to Ugandan kingdoms too, meeting and investing in traditional leaders and kingdoms like Toro. But why? Why and how, with all this generosity and love, did Uganda, and let me say General Museveni, end up betraying Colonel Mummar Gadafi? Gaddafi's relationship and fascination with Uganda started way back in the 70s, during Idi Amin's regime. Now, during this time, he provided both economic and military support to Amin's government. When Amin's rule and regime was under attack, he sent Libyan troops to help rescue his failing regime against Museveni, Obote, and other dissidents, which ended in a disaster. Now, Idi Amin later flew from Uganda to Libya and later settled in Saudi Arabia in 1979. After Amin's overthrow, in 1980, Uganda organized and held elections, which Museveni claimed that they were rigged, dragging Uganda into a civil war between Museveni and Obote. In this war, Museveni and his rebel outfit got stranded due to lack of supplies and military ammunition. When Museveni approached the CIA and the UK for arms, he was turned down due to his closeness with Gaddafi, according to the CIA declassified records. Now, in 1982, Libya airdropped heavy field guns and rocket launchers into Museveni's camps in central Uganda, greatly boosting his rebel outfit and making their victory possible in January 1986. In the early days of Museveni's government, Libya trained Museveni's military. In fact, Museveni's intelligence agencies, that is the External Security Organization as well as the Internal Security Organization, took their names after their Libyan counterparts. Gaddafi would make countless trips to Uganda and fall in love with the country by making investments and building infrastructures. For example, the Libyan Africa Portfolio LAP bought 51% shares of Uganda Telecom Limited and 60% shares of the textile company known as TriStar. Gaddafi also made substantial investments in Tropical African Bank, National Housing and Construction Corporation, the Windsor Lake Victoria Hotel, and so many other companies. Gaddafi even convinced Museveni not to sell unrefined oil, promising to help build a refinery and a pipeline from Uganda to Kenya. By the way, one of the little-known facts is that through Museveni, Gaddafi also funded the RPF rebels after they invaded Rwanda in 1990. He provided them with arms that were flown into Uganda and then handed to the RPF by the Museveni regime. This is the Kingdom of Toro, found in western Uganda. In 2001, Gaddafi became interested in this kingdom. At the time, its ruler, Oyonyimba Kabamba Iguru, was just 9 years old. With Gaddafi's love for this kingdom, he became the main financier of the kingdom projects, including the construction of this mega palace. To the Ugandan Muslim community, Gaddafi left a lasting legacy with a state-of-the-art magnificent mosque with the ability to hold a capacity of 3,000 worshippers. This beautiful peach and cream-colored grand mosque is the second largest in the entire East Africa. During his numerous visits, he even joked with Museveni, asking him to rule for life, and wondered why he even bothered holding elections. At one of his visits, he even promoted Museveni's son Muhoozi Kainerugaba from captain to major, and complained that Museveni was sitting on his son's ranks. It is also said that during the 2001 and 2006 elections, Gaddafi bankrolled Museveni by providing him with finances to run his campaigns during this time. This seemed like an unbreakable relationship that benefited both, but that was not to be. So why did Museveni pull the rug out of Gaddafi? Now this can be narrowed down to two factors. First is the Western interests, and the other one is Gaddafi's ambitions. Like Ghana's first president, the firebrand Kwame Nkrumah, who called for the United States of Africa, Gaddafi poured a lot of energy, rhetoric, and resources into the quest for African unity. During a summit in Sirte in 1999, the Libyan leader helped convince 45 heads of state to approve the creation of an African Union, which succeeded the OAU, and for more than a decade, he was the largest patron and the most outspoken advocate. That same year, Gaddafi came up with the idea of a United States of Africa, uniting the entire continent, creating a single currency and a single military. For Gaddafi, the AU would be used as a launching pad for the creation of a United States of Africa. If there was anyone who would champion something of that magnitude, it was Gaddafi. It is estimated that roughly 15% of the AU operating budget provided by member states came from Libya. His move towards the integration never went unnoticed.
Libya's Colonel Gaddafi has some bold ambitions. His ideas for African unity involve the creation of a United States of Africa.
Whether real or imagined, this was a scary idea to the Western powers and some African leaders who worried about their positions and influence in a united Africa. The idea of a United States of Africa had African leaders divided on the matter. Among those against was General Museveni.
Yes, but I bring up a case of another thing, even though it may sound as if I'm interfering here, where I shouldn't.
You're most welcome.
I'm aware of Mr. Gaddafi's approaches and efforts to get a foothold in your part of Africa and all, and I just like to intervene and caution.
A man Gaddafi had helped come to power, financed his elections, backed to rule for life, and invested a lot in his country. Two reasons explain Museveni's disagreement. First, it was a threat to his own grip on power in Uganda. Though Museveni appreciated the support and flattery, in his mind he did not fight to grab power to be under another leader. It was either him or no one else. Second, Museveni is a regional power blocker for the West in the Great Lakes region. In this position, he serves the interests of the West through military interventions in countries like the Congo and Somalia, as well as providing intelligence to the CIA on the regional leaders.
Mr. President, I started fighting Gaddafi before you started. What? I started fighting Gaddafi before you started.
When General Museveni weighed everything, he chose his side by placing the interests of the West before those of his fellow African leaders. And that is why, when the suggestion was officially tabled during the AU meeting in Accra in 2007, Museveni and the South African leader Thabo Mbeki fiercely shot it down. He was scared that if he championed Gaddafi's idea, the Western wrath would befall him. He was too well aware of who kept him in power, and if they wanted him the next day, he would be gone. On the other hand, by betraying Gaddafi, he became worried that Gaddafi would likely revenge against him with the use of his military and financial juggernaut to destabilize him, something he knew too well about. Museveni clearly understood that resisting Gaddafi was far much easier than resisting the West. The issue here wasn't so much that Museveni disagreed with Gaddafi, but it is how he reacted to Gaddafi's ambitions that amounted to betrayal. Now, thank God for WikiLeaks. By the way, free Julian Assange. It is because of him that we are able to know what happened. On the 13th of June 2008, while attending his son's graduation at Fort Leavenworth in the United States, Museveni expressed his concerns to the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs at the time, Jandai Fraser. The terrified general ratted on the Libyan president that he presented a problem for Africa and that he was pushing for the creation of a United States of Africa to be ruled by one president, which Museveni deemed neither feasible nor desirable due to the cultural and linguistic differences of the continent. Museveni also claimed that Gaddafi pressured small African countries through bribes and other means, making small West African countries afraid to participate fully or speak up during the United Nations, African Union, and other international meetings. Tensions between the two reached an all-time high, causing him to worry that Gaddafi was planning to attack his jet while it crossed the international airspace. Museveni further blackmailed Gaddafi that his vision of a United States of Africa was meant to ensure the spread of Islam around the continent. And so, General Museveni requested for help from the United States of America to provide him with additional air radar information whenever he flies over the international waters. Months later, he would replace his old Gulfstream 4 jet with a new luxury Gulfstream 5 jet at a cost of 88 billion Ugandan shillings, fitted with enhanced anti-terror capabilities. At the time, it was the only one of its kind known to be owned by anybody else on the continent. Museveni's paranoia over Gaddafi wasn't necessarily about the USA, but the popularity of Gaddafi within Uganda. In the Muslim community, the Libyan leader was praised for his generosity with the mosque and other projects. Kingdoms like Toro had benefited a lot from him, with others lined up, making him very popular. When Gaddafi met with the officials of Buganda Kingdom, the largest in the country, in 2008 without the knowledge of Museveni, and paid a surprise visit to the kingdom, holding a meeting for 37 minutes, the government viewed this move as an attempt to undermine Museveni, who was at odds with the kingdom at the time. During the Afro-Arab Youth event, Gaddafi switched tack and said that he wanted now to work with traditional leaders and not elected presidents to achieve his project of a United States of Africa. And so, in January 2009, Gaddafi organized and bankrolled traditional leaders across the African continent to discuss African unity, which drove Museveni nuts and ended up blocking traditional African leaders from Uganda from attending the event. In retaliation, Gaddafi snubbed an African Union meeting on the status of refugees held in Kampala in October 2009. At the time, he was the AU chair. In 2010, the relationship between the two made a U-turn. The Libyan leader made a grand return to Kampala thanks to the intense diplomatic maneuvering. With all these tensions and suspicions, when NATO and its allies launched an attack on Gaddafi, one of the leaders that benefited directly was Museveni. And that is why he did not engage. Why would he even engage, yet he had snitched on Gaddafi to the US for trying to shoot down his jet? I had forgot to mention that Gaddafi was angry with Museveni because he deliberately misled him about the offer by the former US president regarding the destruction of weapons of mass destruction.
Your decision to declare and then to begin to dismantle the nuclear program and the chemical weapons program. You said at the time that Libya expected some enormous benefit, a very real benefit. And many people in Libya say they're still waiting for that benefit. What is Libya waiting for? What do you expect from the West?
I don't believe America fulfilled its commitments and pledges vis-à-vis Libya regarding this point. We have been told that President Bush is a man that honors his own word, and so far we are not so sure of that.
What specifically are you waiting for the U.S. to do? What complaint do you have with President Bush?
Museveni had convinced Gaddafi that the US president at that time, George Bush, would remove sanctions on Libya and open doors for American investment in his country if he destroyed his weapons of mass destruction. The Libyan leader did as told, and was convinced that he had given Bush a decisive campaign advantage in the election. When Gaddafi complained, he was told by key people in the British intelligence that Museveni had sold him a lie. This turned out to be Gaddafi's biggest mistake that led to his downfall. Because if he possessed a nuclear weapon or still pursued a nuclear program, it would act as a deterrence for NATO and its allies to attack Libya. Fast forward to 2021, Museveni since then has been trying to play hero and trying to step into Gaddafi's shoes to become a champion of African unity in finance and security. Well, he is strong in some areas, although he lacks the tenacity, charisma, and above all the financial muscle to see a massive project through. Age is also not on his side, and also his handlers will not be happy if at all he achieves these particular ambitions, and I mean the West, because that is the same reason as to why they fought Gaddafi. During his speech at the 2021 inauguration, he labeled NATO and its allies as aggressors.
The security situations in Libya was created by the arrogant and irresponsible actions of some actors that took actions that were against the express position of the African Union. I can reveal to you that those actors had a narrow escape. I contacted His Excellency Jacob Zuma of South Africa and proposed that African armies that so decided to intervene in Libya and confront and teach a lesson to those aggressors who were let down by Mummar Gadafi, who abandoned Tripoli without a fight. Although at that time I did not have direct link with Mummar Gadafi, I advised his envoy, who came to see me here, turn Tripoli into a Stalingrad, so that if the aggressors so wished, could come on the ground and we fight man to man.
Now seemingly, Museveni was furious at the people who killed and overthrew Gaddafi. The irony of this is that these are the same people that Museveni had been ratting the African strongman to. After Gaddafi's fall, all his assets in Uganda were frozen, and General Museveni could not even save the legacy of the national mosque that he had built. The name Gaddafi had to be scraped off.
It was named the Gaddafi Mosque after completion in 2008 as a tribute to former Libyan leader Mummar Gadafi, whose government paid for it. Now, close to 2 years after Gaddafi was killed, the Uganda Muslim Supreme Council has dropped the name to appease the current Libyan government.
It's now a national mosque because some people, I think, detested the name, those people in power, and yet we wanted to cooperate with them. We had to go by their condition of removing Gaddafi Mosque.
Clearly, Gaddafi is the only African leader that Museveni feared the most. The power he wielded definitely drafted the general on the continent, reducing him to the position of an errand boy. However, with his overthrow, a vacuum appeared that General Museveni had positioned himself to take on with support from the same people that overthrew him. In all honesty, General Museveni could not do anything to save Gaddafi. The only thing he could have done is maybe not to rat him out and blackmail him to his enemies. Even if he wanted a military intervention, there is no way that he would save his regime. When Museveni's time is up, these same people will come for him. And because of his ratting and snitching, there will be no one left to save him.